Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Naruto chose a peaceful life as a farmer. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sun over Konohagakure was a triumphant gold, the kind of brilliant, cloudless sky that usually filled Naruto Uzumaki with an irrepressible urge to shout, to run, to prove himself against its endless blue canvas. It was the kind of day that smelled of warm dust, dango, and the promise of a hearty bowl of ramen. For most of the village, it was a day of celebration. Team 7, the new genin squad under the legendary Kakashi Hatake, had returned. They were alive, they were successful, and they had brought stories of a C-rank mission that had spiraled into an A-rank crucible. Cheers echoed from the villagers who had gathered near the main gate. Welcome back. You showed them. Konoha's finest. Sakura Haruno managed a weak but genuine smile, her relief at being home palpable. She was leaning slightly, favoring the leg that hadn't been twisted in a desperate gambit on the bridge. Sasuke Uchiha stood stiffly, a mask of aloof indifference poorly concealing the simmering humiliation of his defeat, and the dark pride of his reawakened Sharingan. His arm was in a sling, his jaw tight. Kakashi, his single visible eye crinkled in a familiar, lazy smile, offered a placating wave to the crowd, the very picture of a calm, competent leader. And then there was Naruto. He wasn't grinning. He wasn't waving his arms or boasting about his role in defeating a Kiri swordsman. He was walking, one foot in front of the other, his gaze fixed on the dirt path. The vibrant orange of his jumpsuit seemed garish and loud in the face of his profound silence. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. The hero's welcome, the very acknowledgement he had craved his entire life, washed over him without purchase, like water on oiled stone. He could still smell it. Beneath the scent of Konoha's peace, the coppery tang of blood clung to the inside of his nostrils. It was the blood that had blossomed from Haku's chest, a crimson flower that had stolen the breath from Zabuza's lungs long before the final blow. He could still feel the phantom chill of Haku's Senbon needles, the icy precision of a boy who killed with the grace of a dancer. He could still hear the wet, tearing sound of Kakashi's Chidori, a sound like 1,000 birds screaming as they ripped through flesh and bone. Naruto! Hey Naruto! A familiar voice cut through his reverie. Iruka-sensei was jogging towards them, a wide, proud grin on his face. I heard what happened. Are you all okay? I was so worried. To celebrate, first bowl at Ichiraku is on me. This was the call to prayer, the sacred ritual. A mission's end meant ramen. It was the natural order of Naruto's universe. Sasuke grunted a non-committal response. Sakura thanked Iruka but said she needed to see her parents. Kakashi politely declined, citing a mission report that needed filing. All eyes turned to Naruto. Naruto looked up, his blue eyes clouded and distant. He saw Iruka's smiling face, the familiar scar across his nose, the warmth in his gaze. This was the man who had first acknowledged him, and all Naruto could think was that Iruka was part of the world that had made Haku and Zabuza. I'm not hungry, Naruto mumbled. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Iruka's smile faltered, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Even Sasuke shot a sideways glance at him. Naruto not hungry for ramen was like the sun rising in the west. It was a fundamental violation of reality. Naruto? Are you feeling all right? Iruka asked, his voice laced with concern. I'm fine, Naruto said, the words tasting like ash. Just tired. He didn't wait for a response. He pushed past his sensei, past the lingering well-wishers, and began the lonely trek towards his empty apartment. Every step felt heavy, as if he were dragging the entire Great Naruto Bridge behind him. The cheers of the village faded into a dull roar, a sound that no longer had anything to do with him. He had seen the truth of the world on that bridge, and it was a truth that couldn't be celebrated with pork broth and noodles. The small training ground where Team 7 had first met was quiet in the late afternoon. The 3 wooden posts stood as silent witnesses to their history, to a failed bell test, to teamwork forged in desperation, to a bond that now felt fragile and thin. Naruto had requested the meeting. It was another strange inversion of their dynamic. He was usually the one being dragged here, not the one calling the shots. Kakashi arrived in a swirl of leaves, punctual to the minute. He found Naruto sitting on the grass, staring at the memorial stone. The setting sun cast long, somber shadows across the clearing. "You wanted to see me, Naruto?" Kakashi asked, his voice even. He'd been expecting this. The boy's silence had been a scream for attention louder than any of his usual boasts. Naruto didn't turn around. "That day, on the bridge," he began, his voice rough. "Haku, he could have killed Sasuke. He had him. But he didn't." He hesitated, Kakashi supplied. "A fatal flaw for a shinobi." "Was it a flaw?" Naruto's head snapped around, and for the first time, Kakashi saw the raw, turbulent emotion in his student's eyes. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, philosophical anguish. Or was it the only part of him that wasn't a tool? Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly. This was not the line of questioning he had anticipated. "Haku lived for Zabuza," Naruto continued, his voice gaining a desperate strength. "He was Zabuza's weapon. He said it himself. He wanted to be useful, to have a purpose. He found it by being willing to die, by being willing to kill. And when Zabuza died, he cried. He cried tears of blood for the demon who used him." He got to his feet, pacing back and forth in front of the memorial stone, his fists clenched. "Zabuza, he was a monster. He tried to kill you, he tried to kill Tazuna-san, he didn't care about anyone. But at the very end, he wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had lost everything. They were both just broken." He stopped and stared directly at his sensei. The question that had been festering in his soul finally burst forth. "Is that it, Kakashi-sensei? Is that all a shinobi can be? A broken tool that kills other broken tools until we break ourselves?" The question hung in the air, sharp and painful. Kakashi's practiced nonchalance fell away, replaced by the weary gravity of a man who had seen too much war. He looked from Naruto to the names carved on the memorial stone, the names of his own broken comrades. "The life of a shinobi is hard, Naruto," Kakashi said, his voice low. "We make impossible choices to protect our home, our comrades, the will of fire." Zabuza and Haku were rogue ninja. They operated outside the system, driven by greed and ambition. "It's not the same, isn't it?" Naruto shot back, his voice cracking. "We have missions. They had contracts. We killed for Konoha. They killed for Gato. It's just a different flag, a different boss. What happens when the Hokage gives me a mission to kill someone like Haku? A kid who's just fighting for someone they care about. Do I do it? Do I just switch off my heart and become a good little weapon?" "You do it to protect your precious people," Kakashi said, his tone becoming firmer, a teacher trying to instill a difficult lesson. "You do it so that Sakura and Sasuke, and everyone in this village, can live in peace. But Haku was Zabuza's precious person. Don't you see?" Naruto's voice rose, filled with a frantic despair. "We just decided that our precious people were more important than his. We killed him to protect our way of life. But what if our way of life is the thing that keeps making more Hakus and more Zabuzas? What if the whole system is just a machine that runs on blood?" He was breathing heavily now, tears welling in his eyes, blurring the stoic figure of his sensei. "You always say, those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. But what if following the rules means abandoning a part of yourself? The part that cries for the enemy? The part that wishes there was another way? If I kill that part of me, what's left? Will I end up like them? A demon with a sad story, dying in the rain?" Kakashi had no easy answer. He could offer platitudes about duty and honor, about the greater good. But he saw the look in Naruto's eyes, the look of a boy staring into an abyss, and seeing his own reflection. The shinobi world had shown Naruto its true face, and the boy who was all heart was recoiling in horror. "Being a shinobi means carrying that burden, Naruto," Kakashi said finally, his voice soft but unyielding. "You learn to compartmentalize. You learn to live with the ghosts. You do the job because it must be done. That is the path." Naruto stared at him, his tears finally tracing paths through the grime on his cheeks. Kakashi's words were meant to be a comfort, a piece of hard-won wisdom from a veteran, but to Naruto, they sounded like a death sentence. It wasn't a path. It was a cage. You're telling me how to be a good tool, Naruto whispered, his voice hollow with dawning realization. But I don't think I want to be a tool at all. He turned and walked away, leaving Kakashi standing alone by the memorial stone, the weight of his own ghost suddenly feeling heavier than ever before. The Hokage's office was a sanctuary of quiet authority. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment, and the sweet, earthy aroma of Hiruzen Sarutobi's pipe tobacco. Sunlight streamed through the large window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and glinting off the portraits of the previous Hokage. It was a room that had seen declarations of war, the signing of treaties, and the endless, crushing weight of leadership. Hiruzen looked over his desk at the boy standing before him. Naruto was clean now, having washed away the grime of the road, but the exhaustion was etched deep into his features. The vibrant spark that defined him was gone, replaced by a somber, unnerving maturity. You asked to see me, Naruto, the third Hokage said, his voice a gentle, grandfatherly rumble. Is something wrong? Naruto took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had replayed this conversation 1,000 times in his head on the walk over. Gigi, he began, using the familiar, affectionate term. I want to talk about the land of waves. Hiruzen set down his pipe, giving the boy his full attention. He had read Kakashi's preliminary report. He knew it had been a harrowing experience. I understand it was a difficult mission. You all performed admirably. You protected the client and liberated a nation. You should be proud. Proud? The word came out as a bitter scoff. Tazuna-san, the bridge builder, he's a hero. He and his family, they built something. With wood and nails and their bare hands, they built a future for their people. A bridge. Something that connects, something that helps things grow. He gestured vaguely, his hands sketching shapes in the air as if trying to grasp the concept. We went there, and what did we do? We destroyed things. We fought. We killed. We left bodies behind. We protected the builders, yeah, but we weren't builders. We were the guard dogs. The weapons they hired to keep the wolves away. Hiruzen listened patiently, his ancient eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. He had seen this crisis of conscience in countless shinobi before, but rarely so early, and never in a boy with so much fire. That is often the role of a shinobi, Naruto, he said softly. We are the shield that allows the tree of society to grow, even if we must sometimes bloody our hands to do so. But I don't want to be the shield anymore. Naruto's voice rose with passion. I want to be the one planting the tree. When I was on that bridge, watching Haku die, I realized my dream was all wrong. He looked at the Hokage monument visible through the window, the stony faces of the past leaders staring down at him. I thought if I became Hokage, everyone would have to acknowledge me. They'd see me as a hero, as someone strong. But Zabuza was strong. Haku was strong. And all their strength brought them was pain and a lonely death. Is that what being Hokage is? Being the strongest, the best at killing, the one who has to order people to become tools and die for the village? His voice dropped to a near whisper. I don't want people to acknowledge me for how many enemies I can defeat. I want to create something. Something that doesn't involve fighting. I want to put a seed in the ground and watch it grow. I want to give people food, not protect them while they find it. I want to build a house, not guard it. An unfamiliar voice, low and guttural, rumbled in the back of Naruto's mind, a presence he usually only felt in moments of extreme rage. Pathetic. The voice of the nine-tailed fox was a sneer made of pure malice. You contain the greatest destructive power in this world, and you wish to play in the dirt like a peasant? Nurture? Creation? You are a vessel of hatred, boy. This sniveling sentimentality will be your undoing. For the first time, Naruto didn't recoil or yell back at the voice. He simply acknowledged it, his resolve hardening in defiance. You're wrong, he thought with a clarity that surprised him. You're what they want me to be. A weapon. I won't let you be right. He looked back at Hiruzen, his blue eyes clear and unwavering. Gigi. I can't be a shinobi anymore. The air in the room grew still. Hiruzen's kindly expression vanished, replaced by one of profound gravity. The statement was so simple, yet its implications were earth-shattering. Naruto, Think carefully about what you are saying, the Hokage said, his voice losing its gentle edge. To renounce the path of the shinobi is not a small thing. It is your life. It is the legacy your parents. He stopped himself, but it was too late. Naruto's eyes narrowed. My parents? The ones no one will tell me about. Were they shinobi too? Did they die as tools for the village? Hiruzen's silence was answer enough. A wave of bitter confirmation washed over Naruto. I thought so, he said quietly. He walked forward to the Hokage's desk. With deliberate, solemn movements, he untied the hitate from his forehead. The metal plate, with its proud leaf insignia, felt impossibly heavy in his hand. He remembered the joy of receiving it from Iruka, the feeling that he had finally become someone. He placed it gently on the polished wood of the desk. The scratch he had defiantly carved into it seemed to mock him now, a symbol of a rebellion that was too small, a protest against the wrong things. I can't wear this, Naruto said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't be a part of a world where kids are turned into weapons and told it's an honor to die. I can't fight for a peace that's built on the bodies of people like Haku. He took a step back, his shoulders squared. It was the first truly independent decision of his life, a choice born not from a desire for attention or a childish dream, but from a deep, painful conviction. I'm quitting. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the god of shinobi, the man who had led Konoha through 2 great wars, felt a pang in his old heart. He saw not the Jinchuriki, not a village asset, but the lonely orphan boy he had failed in so many ways. He wanted to argue, to command, to tell him of his duty, of the Akatsuki threat he did not yet know, of the danger of a Jinchuriki living a civilian life. But he also saw the look in Naruto's eyes. It was not the fleeting anger of a child. It was the resolute calm of a man who had found an unbearable truth and refused to look away. Forcing him to remain a shinobi now would be a cruelty beyond measure. It would break his spirit, the very thing that made Naruto so special. With a heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades, Hiruzen picked up the headband. He ran his thumb over the cool metal. If this is truly your decision, he said, his voice heavy with resignation, I will not force you to walk a path you despise. But I cannot allow you to simply vanish. You are a special case, Naruto. The village has a vested interest in your well-being. I'm not a prisoner, Naruto said, a flicker of his old defiance returning. No, Hiruzen agreed. But you are a son of Konoha. I will grant your request to be released from shinobi duty. You will be registered as a civilian, but on one condition, you must remain within the borders of the Land of Fire. Do not leave this country. This is for your own safety, and for the villages. Is that understood? It was a cage, but a larger one than he was in now. A compromise. Naruto knew it was the best he would get. He nodded slowly. I understand. I will arrange for your genin stipend to be converted to a small civilian pension for a time, to help you get started, Hiruzen added, his gaze softening again. Where will you go? I don't know, Naruto admitted, and for the first time, a sliver of fear pierced his resolve. The future was a complete, terrifying blank. Away from here. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can grow things. Hiruzen nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. Be well, Naruto. You too, Gigi, Naruto replied. He gave one last look at the office, at the old man behind the desk, at the headband that represented a life he was leaving behind. Then he turned and walked out, the door closing with a soft, final click. Naruto's apartment had never felt more like a cage. The bare walls, the stacks of instant ramen cups, the single wilting plant on the windowsill he always forgot to water. It was the home of a boy with no real roots. It was the space he occupied, not the place he lived. He moved with a numb sort of efficiency. He found an old, sturdy rucksack in the back of his closet. What did a civilian need? Not kunai. Not shuriken or explosive tags. He left his ninja tool pouch on the floor. He packed 2 spare sets of clothes, consciously leaving his iconic orange jumpsuit behind. He packed a bar of soap, a toothbrush, and the worn, threadbare blanket from his bed. He paused at his nightstand. The picture of Team 7 sat in its simple wooden frame. Kakashi, with his masked, lazy expression. Sakura, her smile bright and hopeful. Sasuke, his scowl a permanent fixture, and himself, grinning like an idiot, a streak of paint on his cheek. It was a picture of a life that had ended yesterday. It represented a bond forged in a world he was now rejecting. With a pang of regret that felt like a physical blow, he left the picture on the stand. A clean break. His hand went to his gamachan, the frog-shaped wallet. He opened it. It was pitifully light. A few crumpled Rio bills. It wouldn't last him long. But it was a start. He slung the rucksack over his shoulder and took one last look around the tiny apartment. It held no happy memories, only the ghost of a profound, aching loneliness. He didn't feel sad to leave it. He felt relieved. He walked through the sleeping village under the cover of pre-dawn darkness. The streets were empty, the paper lanterns casting a soft, warm glow. He passed Ichiraku Ramen, its curtain drawn, the smell of old broth faint in the air. He passed the academy, the swing set where he had spent so many lonely hours. Finally, he stood at the foot of the cliff, looking up at the Hokage monument. The four faces carved in stone were bathed in the pale light of the waning moon. For his entire life, he had looked at that mountain with burning ambition. It was the ultimate prize, the symbol of acceptance and strength. I'm gonna have my face up there someday. Now, he just saw four men. Four shinobi who had climbed a mountain of corpses to reach the top. Four men who had borne the burden he was now refusing to pick up. He looked at the face of the fourth Hokage, the hero who had saved the village and, in doing so, cursed him to this life. There was no anger, no resentment. Just a deep, hollow sadness for a dream that had died. He turned his back on the mountain and walked towards the main gate. The guards on duty were tired, paying little attention to the lone figure walking out. His lack of a headband marked him as a civilian. They waved him through without a second glance. The sun was just beginning to rise as Naruto Uzumaki stepped outside the walls of Konohagakure. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a promise of a new day. The road stretched out before him, an unfamiliar path leading into an unknown world. He was 13 years old, utterly alone, and leaving behind the only life he had ever known. He didn't look back. He squared his shoulders, tightened his grip on the strap of his rucksack, and took the first step into his new life, a single, potent question echoing in the quiet chambers of his heart. What does it feel like to plant a seed and watch it grow? The road was a relentless teacher, and its lessons were etched into Naruto Uzumaki's very bones. For 3 weeks, he had been a ghost adrift in the land of fire, a flash of ragged orange against the greens and browns of the countryside. The meager savings Hiruzen had given him had dwindled with shocking speed, a casualty of overpriced bread from suspicious vendors and a single night in a Lumpian bed to escape a torrential downpour. He learned that the world outside Konoha's walls did not run on bravado and grand declarations. It ran on coin, calloused hands, and a quiet, weary suspicion of strangers. His shinobi training, once the bedrock of his identity, had become a collection of useless parlor tricks. He could walk on water, but he couldn't afford a boat ticket to cross a river. He could form a dozen shadow clones, but a baker wouldn't accept a dozen identical promises of future payment. He could throw a kunai with pinpoint accuracy, but the skill was worthless when all he wanted to hit was the bottom of a bowl of soup. The sun was a merciless hammer in a sky of bleached blue, beating down on the dusty track. Naruto's stomach was a hollow, aching cavern, its growls a constant, pathetic counterpoint to the chirping of cicadas. He had tried to find work. In one town, he'd offered to help a blacksmith, only to be chased out when his attempt to use chakra to stoke the forge nearly blew the roof off the smithy. In another, he tried to help fishermen haul their nets, but his eagerness resulted in a tangled mess that cost them half their morning's catch. He was too loud, too clumsy, too much. He was a creature of explosive energy in a world that valued a slow, steady burn. It was in this state, filthy, famished, and with the last of his youthful optimism sandblasted away by the road, that he stumbled into a place that didn't even have a name on his worn map. It was less a village and more a collection of sturdy, thatched roof houses clustered together like mushrooms after a rain. They were surrounded on all sides by an ocean of green and gold fields, the air thick with the loamy scent of turned earth and growing things. A single well stood at its center, a communal heart around which the hamlet's quiet life pulsed. As Naruto limped towards the well, a few villagers paused their work to watch him. Their eyes were not hostile, not like the glares he'd received in Konoha, but they were guarded. They saw a boy with sun-bleached blonde hair wild as a lion's mane, a face smudged with dirt, and eyes that held a desperate, hungry fire. He was an unknown variable, a stone tossed into their tranquil pond. He drank deeply from the bucket, the cool water a balm to his cracked lips and parched throat. When he looked up, a stern-faced woman with a basket of laundry was staring at him. "You looking for something, boy?" she asked, her tone flat. "Work," Naruto croaked, his voice rough. "Anything. I'm a hard worker, believe it. I can help with, whatever you need." The woman exchanged a look with a man mending a fence nearby. The man shook his head almost imperceptibly. "Nothing for you here," the woman said, turning her back on him. "Best be on your way." The dismissal was quiet, but it stung more than any shout. It wasn't hatred. It was indifference. He was simply not their problem. Dejected, Naruto sat on the edge of the well, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He was a shinobi who had faced down a demon of the mist, and he was being defeated by a laundry basket. From the shade of a nearby porch, two pairs of eyes watched him. One pair belonged to Kaido, a man whose face was a road map of long years spent under the sun, his back stooped from a lifetime of bending to the earth. The other belonged to his wife, Hana, a small, bird-like woman with kind, crinkled eyes and hands that, despite being weathered by work, moved with a gentle grace. "He's just a boy, Kaido," Hana murmured, her gaze soft with pity. "He's a stranger," Kaido grunted, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of the same sympathy. "And he looks like he's seen his share of trouble." "He looks like he hasn't seen a decent meal in a month," she countered. "Look at him. All skin and bones. And that color he's wearing, it's like he's trying to scare the crows away himself." They watched as Naruto's stomach let out a particularly loud, mournful growl. The boy clutched his middle, his face flushing with embarrassment even though no one else was close enough to hear. That was the moment that broke through Kaido's reserve. It was a display of pure, unvarnished human need. Hana stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm making stew for dinner." "I'll make extra, Hana," Kaido began, a note of caution in his voice. "Oh, hush," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We have a roof and a full pantry. The earth has been good to us. The least we can do is share a bowl of soup with a hungry child. It's bad luck to let a traveler go hungry at your doorstep." Kaido grumbled but didn't protest further. He knew better than to argue with his wife when she got that look in her eye, the one that said she was adopting another stray, whether it be a cat, a bird with a broken wing, or in this case, a half-starved teenager dressed like a sunset. An hour later, the smell of simmering vegetables and savory broth wafted through the hamlet. It was a scent that promised warmth, comfort, and home. For Naruto, it was agonizing torture. He was trying to summon the will to stand up and walk to the next nameless town when a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see the small, elderly woman from the porch. "You're still here," she said. It wasn't a question. "Nowhere else to be," Naruto mumbled, unable to meet her gaze. "Humph. Well, no sense in you starving to death on our well," she said briskly. "My husband and I have more stew than we can eat. It would be a shame to let it go to waste. Come." Naruto stared at her, stunned. He had been braced for another rejection, another command to move along. This simple offer of kindness was so unexpected it felt like a jutsu, disarming him completely. He could only nod, a lump forming in his throat as he scrambled to his feet and followed her to the small, well-kept farmhouse on the edge of the fields. The meal was the single greatest thing Naruto had ever tasted. It was a simple vegetable stew, thick with potatoes, carrots, and beans from their own garden, but to him, it was a feast fit for a daimyo. He devoured the first bowl in a series of grateful, noisy slurps. Hana, far from being offended, simply smiled and refilled it. He ate a second, and then a third. Kaido watched him from across the small wooden table, his expression unreadable, puffing on a simple wooden pipe. "Thank you," Naruto said finally, his voice thick with emotion as he scraped the last drop from his third bowl. "Thank you so much, Bachan." Hana's smile widened. "It is just stew. And my name is Hana. This is my husband, Kaido." Kaido grunted in acknowledgement. Boy's got an appetite. Could eat a horse and chase the rider. I was really hungry, Naruto admitted, blushing. I can work to pay you back. I'll chop wood, or carry water, or anything. Kaido took a long draw from his pipe, smoke curling around his weathered face. You said you were looking for work? Know anything about farming? Naruto's face fell. No, sir. Nothing at all. Humph, honest, at least, Kaido said. He looked at the boy's hands, which were calloused from weapons training, not fieldwork. He saw the latent strength in his shoulders, the coiled energy that seemed to vibrate just under his skin. Farm work is hard. It's slow. It's not for everyone. I can learn, Naruto insisted, leaning forward with an intensity that made the old farmer blink. I'm a fast learner, believe it. I'll do whatever you say. I need a chance. Kaido and Hana exchanged another silent look. It was a conversation they had had countless times over 50 years of marriage. Hana's eyes pleaded. Kaido's held 1,000 practical objections, but they also held the memory of the son they had lost to a fever decades ago, a ghost that left their home quiet and their fields feeling vast and empty. This boy, with his wild hair and desperate energy, was a whirlwind of life in their quiet world. Kaido let out a long, slow stream of smoke. We have a spare room in the back. Small. The roof leaks a little when the rain comes from the east. You can have it, and a seat at our table. In exchange, you will work our fields. From sunup to sundown. You will do as I say, when I say it. You break one of my tools, you complain about the work, or you cause any trouble in this village, and you're gone. Understand? Naruto's eyes went wide. A room. Food. Work. A place. It was more than he had dared to hope for. A grin, the first genuine, full-wattage Naruto Uzumaki grin in weeks, split his face. Yes. Absolutely. You won't regret this, I promise. I'll be the best farmer you've ever seen. Kaido just grunted again. We'll see about that. Now, finish your stew. Work starts before the sun is up. The next morning, Naruto learned that the life of a farmer was a war fought on a dozen fronts, and he was an unarmed, untrained recruit. His first enemy was the hoe. Kaido handed him a sturdy, well-worn tool and pointed to a fallow patch of earth that needed to be tilled. Straight lines, Kaido instructed. Even depth. Turn the soil over, break up the clumps. Don't rush. Naruto, eager to impress, attacked the task with the same explosive force he would a training dummy. He channeled his chakra into his arms and swung the hoe like a weapon. Dirt flew everywhere. The hoe dug in too deep, jarring his arms, and then skipped over the surface on the next swing. His lines were crooked, his rhythm non-existent. Within 10 minutes he was sweating profusely, his back was aching, and he had managed to mangle a tiny patch of land into an uneven mess. Breathe, boy, Kaido said from behind him, his voice dry. You're trying to kill the dirt, not persuade it. It's not a fight. It's a conversation. He took the hoe from Naruto's hands. His movements were slow, economical, and possessed a grace that belied his age. The hoe rose and fell in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Thunk. Scrape. Lift. Turn. The soil turned over in a neat dark ribbon. There was no wasted energy, no explosive effort. It was the epitome of patience made manifest. Naruto watched, humbled. He had spent years learning to control his chakra for powerful, instantaneous results. This was a different kind of control. It was about stamina, consistency, and a connection to the tool and the task that felt completely alien. He spent the rest of the day trying to mimic Kaido's rhythm, his muscles screaming in protest, his mind railing against the sheer, monotonous repetition. Planting the daikon radish seeds was even worse. Hana showed him how, pressing each tiny seed into the soil with a gentle thumb, just so. Not too deep, or they'll never see the sun, she explained softly. Not too shallow, or the birds will have them. Give them space to grow, like you would a child. Naruto's fingers, accustomed to the precise grip of a kunai, felt like clumsy sausages. He dropped seeds, planted them in crooked lines, and pushed them too far into the earth. His shadow clones might have made the work faster, but Kaido had forbidden it. No tricks, he'd said. Just you and the land. Learn it the right way. The silence of the fields was another challenge. In Konoha, there was always noise, the clamor of the marketplace, the shouts of other ninja in training, the constant thrum of a village full of people. Here, the only sounds were the whisper of the wind through the crops, the buzz of insects, and the rhythmic scrape of his hoe. It left him with nothing but the echoing vastness of his own thoughts. And in that silence, another voice made itself known. This is what you abandoned your destiny for. Kurama's voice was a low, contemptuous rumble in the back of his mind, a current of pure malice beneath the placid surface of his new life. To grovel in the dirt like an animal? Your hands were meant to wield power that could shatter mountains, and you're using them to poke holes in the mud. Naruto gritted his teeth, his hands tightening on the handle of his hoe. It's better than being a weapon, he shot back in his mind, the argument already old and familiar. A weapon has purpose. The fox sneered. It has honor. You are a disgrace to the power you hold. This weakness, this sentimentality, you shame us both. This isn't weakness, Naruto thought, as he carefully dropped a seed into the earth. He tried to mimic the gentleness Hana had shown him. I'm making something. Something people can eat. It's real. It's better than a mission report filled with names of the dead. You are a fool. A sentimental, deluded child. The world will not leave you to your garden. It will come for you. And when it does, this patience you are learning will be the death of you. The internal battle raged for weeks. Every aching muscle at the end of the day, every failed attempt to plow a straight line, every condescending chuckle from a neighboring farmer was ammunition for Kurama's scorn. There were moments when Naruto was tempted to give in, to unleash a Rasengan on the stubborn, unyielding earth, to prove that he was still powerful. But then he would come in from the fields, and Hana would have a warm cloth for his face and a cup of cool barley tea. Kaido would silently inspect his crooked rows, offer a single, gruff correction, and then share his pipe on the porch as the sun went down. These small, quiet acts of kindness were a balm on his soul. They were his anchor against the fox's tide of rage. He was slowly, painstakingly, forming bonds that had nothing to do with being on a team or fighting for a common cause. He was becoming part of the rhythm of this family, this hamlet. He learned the names of the other villagers, the best times to fish in the nearby stream, and the way the light changed over the fields throughout the day. He even found a use for his old skills, repurposed for this new life. His chakra control, honed by years of tree-walking exercises, proved invaluable for watering the delicate new seedlings. He could gather water chakra in his palms and release it as a fine, gentle mist, far better than the heavy-handed slosh of a watering can. Hana had watched him do it once, her eyes wide with wonder, and had simply patted his head, calling him her clever little rain cloud. The simple praise filled him with more pride than any of Kakashi's grudging compliments. He used his stamina to work longer than anyone else, and his durable body to handle the most backbreaking tasks. He was slowly earning his place, not through power or spectacle, but through sweat and persistence. The villagers' guarded looks were slowly being replaced by nods of greeting, and occasionally, a shared joke at his expense about his perpetually crooked furrows. He was becoming Naruto, the clumsy but hard-working farmhand, not Naruto, the Jinchuriki, the pariah, or the failed ninja. Still, the failure stung. A section of carrots he planted came up stunted and bitter because he'd watered them incorrectly. A row of beans withered on the vine because he'd failed to notice an infestation of aphids. Each failure was a small death, a reminder of his incompetence. He wasn't a natural. This didn't come easy. He saw the effortless way Kaido and Hana moved, how they could read the soil, the sky, the plants themselves, and he felt a familiar despair. He was a failure here, too. One morning, he went out to the fields just as the sun was cresting the horizon, painting the sky in soft pastels. He walked to the small patch that was designated as his, the first plot he had tilled and planted entirely on his own. It was a patch of simple leafy greens, and for weeks, it had remained stubbornly, infuriatingly brown. He had all but given up on it, convinced he had killed the seeds before they even had a chance. He knelt down, the morning dew cool on his knees, and stared at the unforgiving dirt. He was about to stand up and move on to his daily chores when he saw it. It was tiny. almost insignificant. A minuscule speck of vibrant, impossible green pushing its way through a crack in the dark soil. 2 tiny leaves, curled and delicate, were unfurling themselves towards the morning sun. A seedling. His seedling. Naruto stared, his breath caught in his chest. He reached out a trembling finger, stopping just short of touching it, as if his clumsy hands might break it. It was so fragile, so vulnerable, yet so defiant. It was alive. And he had helped it. He hadn't used a jutsu. He hadn't overwhelmed it with power. He had tilled the soil, planted the seed, watered the ground, and waited. He had been patient. He had been a partner. A slow, wide smile spread across his face, a feeling of pure, unadulterated joy bubbling up from his core. It was a feeling entirely different from the adrenaline rush of mastering the shadow clone jutsu or the fierce pride of landing a punch on an enemy. This wasn't a victory born of conflict or a demonstration of power. It was a quiet testament to creation. It was the result of care, of nurturing, of hope. He had put something in the ground, and it had grown. Humph. It is just a weed, Kurama grumbled, but for the first time, the fox's voice lacked its usual biting contempt. There was a hint of something else in it, a grudging, almost imperceptible note of curiosity. Naruto ignored him. He remained kneeling in the dirt as the sun climbed higher, watching the tiny green shoot as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. He had left a life of chasing acknowledgement, of seeking to have his face carved in stone. But here, in the silence of a nameless field, watching a single, tiny plant reach for the light, he felt truly seen for the first time. It was a victory not of power, but of patience. And it was the first victory that had ever truly felt like his own. 2 years can carve a new man out of a boy. The land of fire's relentless cycle of sun and rain had been a patient, unforgiving sculptor, and Naruto Uzumaki was its finest work. The scrawny, attention-starved child who had walked out of Konoha's gates was a memory, faded like an old photograph. In his place stood a young man of 15, lean and tall, with the kind of dense, practical muscle that comes not from sparring but from the ceaseless toil of hauling water, turning soil, and splitting wood. His skin was tanned a deep, healthy bronze, a stark contrast to the startling blonde of his hair, now longer and often tied back with a simple leather thong to keep it from his eyes. The garish orange jumpsuit was long gone, replaced by simple, earth-toned cotton trousers and a loose-fitting tunic that was more often than not stained with sweat and soil. The only splash of his signature color was a thin, faded orange sash he wore around his waist, a quiet nod to the boy he had once been. But the most profound change was in his hands. They were no longer the hands of a ninja, designed for the precise grip of a kunai or the intricate weaving of hand seals. They were broader, stronger, the palms and fingers a tapestry of calluses that told the story of 1,000 hours spent gripping the handle of a hoe, pulling stubborn weeds, and shaping the earth. He moved with a new rhythm, an unhurried grace that was the antithesis of his former frantic energy. His life was now governed by the sun and the seasons, not by mission scrolls and the whims of a jounin commander. Sunup was for tilling and planting, midday was for watering and weeding, and sundown was for mending tools and sharing a quiet meal with Kaido and Hana, the 2 elderly farmers who had become the closest thing to parents he had ever known. He had found his peace in the furrows of their fields. And with peace, he had found the very thing he had chased so desperately in Konoha, acknowledgement. Here, no one stared at him with fear or hatred. No one whispered the word monster behind his back. Here, he was simply Naruto. He was the boy with the tireless back who could always be counted on to help a neighbor mend a roof. He was the one with the uncanny knack for coaxing the most vibrant vegetables from the soil. He was the young man whose laughter, now a deep and easy sound, echoed through the fields as he engaged in good-natured arguments with the other villagers about the best time to harvest the pumpkins. He was valued not for his potential power, but for his present contribution. He was a part of something. He was home. Naruto! Hana's voice, thin but clear as a bell, carried from the porch of their farmhouse. Kenji the merchant is here. He's brought the new cloth you asked for. Naruto plunged his shovel one last time into the rich, dark earth, a satisfied grunt escaping his lips. He straightened up, wiping a sheen of sweat from his brow with the back of a dirt-caked forearm. A genuine, unforced smile lit up his face. Coming, Hanaba-chan. He jogged towards the house, his boots kicking up little puffs of dust. Kenji was a portly, cheerful merchant who made a circuit through the remote farming hamlets every few months, his cart a treasure trove of goods from the larger towns and a vessel for the news of the wider world. He was the village's primary link to everything that existed beyond their rolling fields. Ah, Naruto-kun! Getting taller every time I see you, Kenji boomed, his mustache twitching with amusement. Soon you'll be able to pluck the apples from the highest branches without a ladder. The farm life suits you. It's hard work that makes you grow, Kenji-san, Naruto replied with an easy grin, accepting a cup of cool water from Hana. What news do you bring from the road? Anything more interesting than the price of salt? Kenji's cheerful demeanor sobered slightly. He took a long drink from his own cup before speaking, his voice dropping. The roads are getting stranger, boy. More dangerous. There are whispers, stories of men in black cloaks, decorated with red clouds. Naruto's posture tightened almost imperceptibly. The description was vague, but it struck a dissonant chord within him, a faint echo of a world he had tried so hard to forget. They move in pairs, Kenji continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. And they aren't common bandits. The stories say they're looking for certain people. Some say they're bounty hunters for a wealthy lord. Others say they're something else entirely, monsters in human skin. Kaido, who had been silently inspecting a new sickle from Kenji's cart, spoke without looking up. Just travelers' tales to scare children. Every few years, a new bogeyman pops up to explain away a few disappearances. Perhaps, Kenji conceded, but these tales are coming from all over. From the land of rivers, the land of grass, even down south. They say there was trouble in Sunagakure not long ago, an attack on the Kazekage himself. Naruto's heart gave a strange, sharp pang. The Kazekage. He remembered the reports from the aborted Chunin exams he'd heard about just before leaving Konoha. A terrifying, gourd-carrying boy from the sand village. Gaara. He remembered the oppressive, lonely aura the boy had possessed, an echo of his own childhood isolation. The thought of him being attacked stirred a strange, disquieting empathy. Was he okay? Naruto asked, his voice quieter than before. The stories are all muddled, Kenji said with a shrug. Some say he was grievously injured, others that he drove the attackers off without a scratch. Sand shinobi are a tight-lipped bunch, but the point is, things are unsettled. The great villages seem to be tensing up, like animals that smell a storm on the wind. It's a good time to be living in a quiet, out-of-the-way place like this. The conversation shifted to crop prices and local gossip, but a small, dark seed of unease had been planted in Naruto's mind. Black cloaks with red clouds. An attack on a fellow Jinchuriki. It was the shinobi world rumbling in the distance, a reminder of the life of conflict he had so deliberately abandoned. He felt a profound wave of gratitude for the simple, solid reality of the farm around him. That world was not his problem anymore. The quiet rhythm of Naruto's new life had also brought an unexpected change in his oldest, most unwelcome companion. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox sealed within him, was a creature of cataclysmic rage and boundless hatred. For years, his presence had been a constant, boiling wellspring of fury in Naruto's gut. But the slow, repetitive, and peaceful nature of farming had a peculiar effect on the beast. The constant physical labor left Naruto too exhausted for existential rage. The deep connection to the earth, the feel of the soil, the patient act of nurturing life, it was all anathema to the fox's destructive nature. The ambient hatred that had fed the seal for years began to starve. The fox was still a creature of malice, but his constant, seething monologue had faded into a more infrequent, grumbling commentary. The silence was a relief, but it was the other effect that was truly strange. Naruto hadn't noticed it at first. He had just assumed he had a green thumb, as Hana called it. But the evidence was becoming undeniable. The vegetables in the plot he personally tended grew a little larger, a little faster. Their colors were more vibrant, their taste more robust. The villagers called it Naruto's luck, and they would often ask him to bless their own patches by turning the first bit of soil. He didn't understand it until one sweltering afternoon, while he was meditating under the shade of a large willow tree, a practice Kaido had insisted upon to calm his whirlwind spirit. As he focused his senses, he felt his own chakra, a familiar, bright blue river. But beneath it, he felt the vast, molten ocean of Kurama's power. It was no longer just a chaotic storm of red. There was something else there, a different quality he'd never sensed before. It was the yang half of Kurama's chakra, the aspect of pure life force and physical energy. Unmoored from the yin half of spiritual energy, it was a raw, untamed force for vitality. And subconsciously, in the peace of his new life, Naruto had been leaking it into the world around him. His desire to nurture, to create, was being amplified by the very power that was meant only for destruction. He was, in essence, a human fertilizer bomb. This is a perversion, Kurama's voice rumbled through his mind, the first time the fox had initiated contact in weeks. The tone wasn't just angry, it was deeply, fundamentally offended. My chakra is the power of calamity. The fire that scours the earth. You are using it to grow radishes. The sheer disgust in the way he said the word was palpable. It's my chakra too, Naruto thought back, not with anger, but with a simple, solid certainty. If it helps things grow, then that's what I'll use it for. You are an insult to every Jinchuriki who came before you, the fox snarled. They embraced their power. They became weapons, forces of nature. You have become a gardener. Maybe they would have been happier if they had, Naruto replied, his focus returning to the feel of the breeze on his skin. A long, rumbling silence followed. The fox had no immediate retort. This new Naruto, calm and centered in his purpose, was an entirely different kind of warden. He couldn't be goaded by insults or promises of power. His foundation was no longer a desperate need for acknowledgement, but the solid earth beneath his feet. It was infuriating, and in a way that Kurama would never admit, it was faintly intriguing. This strange, peaceful application of his power was something new, and for a being of near-infinite age, novelty was a rare and curious thing. The first sign that the distant rumblings of the world were drawing closer came not from a merchant, but from a farmer. A man named Takeda, from a hamlet a half-day's walk to the east, stumbled into their village one evening. His face was a swollen, purple mess, one arm was in a crude sling, and his eyes were wild with terror and shame. The villagers gathered at the well as Hana cleaned Takeda's wounds. He told his story in ragged, breathless bursts. A group of men, a dozen or so, had descended on his village a week ago. They weren't just bandits, he explained. They were organized. Their leader was a man with cold, dead eyes and metal gauntlets who could punch a hole through an oak door. They called him Kageyama, Takeda choked out, wincing as Hana applied a poultice to a cut on his cheek. They didn't just raid and leave. They demanded a tribute. A tax, half of our harvest, half of our savings, to protect us. A wave of fear washed over the assembled villagers. It was an old, ugly story. We tried to refuse, Takeda continued, his voice breaking. We have our own families to feed. Kageyama, he just laughed. He broke my arm to make his point. He said they would be back in a month for their first payment. And that they were moving west. He said he'd heard of a particularly prosperous little village in this direction. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Their village, with its bountiful harvests, the harvests Naruto had helped make so rich, was a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. For the next few weeks, a shadow lay over the hamlet. The easy laughter was gone, replaced by hushed, worried conversations. Every strange noise in the night sent people rushing to their windows. They had no defenses. They were farmers, not fighters. They had a few old hunting bows and a collection of sharp farming implements. Against common thugs, they might have stood a chance. Against a dozen organized men led by someone with the skills of a shinobi, they were lambs for the slaughter. Naruto felt their fear as if it were his own. He saw the way Kaido's hand rested on the handle of his wood-chopping axe, the way Hana flinched at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. These people had taken him in, given him a home, a purpose. The thought of their peace being shattered by thugs filled him with a cold, slow-burning anger that was chillingly familiar. It was the same protective fire he had felt for Tazuna and his family on the bridge. See? Kurama's voice was a low, triumphant whisper in his mind. The world does not care for your garden. It will always come to burn it down. And what will you do then, farmer? Will you throw turnips at them? Naruto's jaw tightened. He found himself walking the perimeter of the village every evening, his senses on high alert. He noted the weaknesses, the open paths, the lack of a wall, the clear lines of sight from the surrounding forest. His old instincts, buried under 2 years of peaceful labor, were beginning to stir. He could feel the shinobi he had tried to kill off scratching at the inside of his skull, demanding to be let out. He had renounced that life, but its lessons were branded onto his soul, and right now, those lessons seemed to be the only thing that might save his home. The day finally came. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long, golden shadows across the fields. A lookout, a young boy posted in a tall tree, let out a terrified shout. "They're here!" On the east road, panic erupted. Villagers scrambled, barring their doors, hiding their children. Kaido emerged from the farmhouse, his face grim, carrying his heavy axe. It was a pathetic gesture of defiance, but a gesture nonetheless. Naruto placed a calming hand on the old man's shoulder. "Stay with Hanabachi-chan," Naruto said, his voice low and steady, with an authority that made the old farmer pause. "Keep everyone inside." "And you, boy?" Kaido asked, his eyes searching Naruto's. "What will you do?" "I'm just going to go talk to them," Naruto said. It was a lie, and they both knew it. He walked alone down the path that led out of the village, his heart a heavy, pounding drum in his chest. He saw them then. A dozen ragged men, armed with swords and clubs, their faces cruel and hungry. At their head was a man who fit Takeda's description perfectly. He was tall and wiry, with a shaved head and a vicious scar that snaked across his scalp. His eyes were like chips of obsidian. On his fists he wore heavy, iron-plated gauntlets that glinted in the sun. He walked with a predator's swagger, the confidence of a wolf entering a sheep pen. This was Kageyama. The bandits fanned out, their expressions a mixture of arrogance and contempt as they took in the quaint, undefended village. "Well, well," Kageyama called out, his voice a gravelly sneer. "What's this? The welcoming committee?" He looked Naruto up and down, taking in the simple farmer's clothes and the dirt under his fingernails. "They send a boy to do a man's begging? Pathetic." Naruto stopped about 20 feet away from them. He kept his hands open and visible at his sides, his posture non-threatening. "You're Kageyama," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," the bandit leader replied, puffing out his chest. "And you and your pathetic village are about to become my newest source of income. You know the terms. Half of everything. In return I protect you from me." His men chuckled appreciatively. "This is a peaceful village," Naruto said, his voice even. "We have nothing of value. Just what we need to survive. If you take half, our children will go hungry this winter." "Not my problem," Kageyama shrugged. "Should have planted more. Now, are you going to step aside and let us collect our down payment, or do I have to make an example out of you?" He cracked his knuckles, the metal of his gauntlets grinding together with a menacing rasp. The villagers watched from their windows, their hearts in their throats. They saw the boy they knew, the kind, hard-working farmhand, standing alone against a dozen armed cutthroats. It was hopeless, but then they saw something change. It was subtle. Naruto's shoulders, which had been in the relaxed slump of a farmer, squared and settled into the balanced, ready stance of a fighter. His gaze, which had been pleading, sharpened into a focused, analytical glare. The easygoing warmth vanished from his blue eyes, replaced by an icy, dangerous calm they had never seen before. The air around him seemed to grow heavy, charged with a sudden, palpable tension. He was still just a boy in farmer's clothes, covered in the honest dirt of his labor. But as he met the missing Nin's cruel gaze, a flicker of something ancient and powerful ignited in the depths of his eyes. It was the shadow of a fox. It was the ghost of a shinobi. It was the first spark of a storm that had lain dormant for 2 long years, and was now, finally, beginning to wake. "You should leave," Naruto said, his voice no longer the voice of a boy, but the low, unwavering tone of a man drawing a line in the sand. "This is your only warning." Kageyama threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, grating sound that scraped the idyllic quiet of the evening. His men joined in, a chorus of cruel, mocking chuckles. The sight was absurd. A lone, dirt-streaked farm boy, no older than 15, issuing a warning to a dozen hardened bandits led by a man who had left a trail of broken bones and terror across the countryside. A warning? Kageyama sneered, wiping a tear of mirth from the corner of his eye. The little farmer has spirit. I like that. It makes the breaking in so much more satisfying. He gestured lazily with one of his gauntlet fists. Boys, clear the path. Be gentle with him. I want him conscious enough to watch us count his village's money. Two of the bandits, hulking men with brutish faces and rusty swords, swaggered forward. They cracked their necks, their grins filled with sadistic glee. For them, this was the fun part of the job, the casual brutality that punctuated the monotony of extortion. Naruto didn't move. His body remained in that deceptively relaxed stance, his blue eyes fixed on the approaching thugs. The world seemed to slow down, the chirping of the cicadas fading into a dull drone. He could feel the thrum of his own heart, a steady, powerful beat. 2 years of peace had not erased a decade of training. The instincts, the muscle memory, the combat awareness, it was all still there, buried just beneath the calluses and the suntanned skin, like dormant seeds waiting for the first rain of violence. Finally, Kurama's voice was a low growl in his mind, not of scorn this time, but of dark, predatory anticipation. Let them see what a true monster looks like. Unleash me. Let us burn this field and salt the earth with their bones. No, Naruto thought back, his focus absolute. This isn't about destruction. This is about protection. I won't kill them. Sentimentality, the fox hissed, but there was a grudging respect in the word now. Then show me how a gardener fights. The first bandit lunged, his sword swinging in a clumsy, horizontal arc aimed to cleave Naruto in two. It was a telegraphed, undisciplined attack, born of arrogance and contempt for his opponent. To the terrified villagers watching from their windows, the swing was terrifyingly fast. To Naruto, it was moving through molasses. He didn't dodge. He flowed. In a single, fluid motion, he dropped his center of gravity, the years of bending to the earth making the movement as natural as breathing. The sword whistled harmlessly over his head, so close he could feel the wind of its passage. As he came up, he wasn't empty-handed. His right hand, which had shot down to the ground, was now clutching a fistful of loose soil and pebbles. With a flick of his wrist, he threw the dirt directly into the bandit's face. The man roared in surprise and pain, stumbling back, clawing at his now blinded eyes. The second bandit, momentarily stunned by the unconventional tactic, charged forward with a bellow of rage, his club raised high for a crushing overhead blow. Naruto pivoted on his heel, his body a whirlwind of motion. His old shinobi training screamed at him to form a seal, to create a clone, to end this with a single, overwhelming jutsu. He ignored it. He was a farmer now. And a farmer knew his terrain. He sidestepped the club, which slammed into the ground where he'd been standing, cracking the hard-packed earth. As the bandit struggled to wrench the heavy weapon free, Naruto drove the heel of his palm into the man's exposed elbow joint. Not a chakra-infused strike meant to shatter bone, but a precise, physical blow aimed at a nerve cluster. The man's arm went numb, his fingers spasming open. The club fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Before the bandit could even register the disarmament, Naruto's foot swept out, hooking behind the man's ankle and sending him sprawling into the dust. It had taken less than 3 seconds. 2 armed men, disabled, and Naruto hadn't moved more than 5 feet. He hadn't used a single jutsu. He had used dirt, leverage, and an intimate knowledge of the human body's weaknesses. Kageyama's laughter died in his throat. The remaining bandits took an involuntary step back, their arrogant smirks replaced by expressions of shock and dawning apprehension. This wasn't a farm boy, or if he was unlike any they had ever encountered. You're a shinobi, Kageyama hissed, his eyes narrowing. The deadness in his gaze was now alight with a cold, predatory focus. He'd been a low-level chunin from a minor village himself before he'd found that crime paid better and demanded less loyalty. He recognized the economy of motion, the calm, deadly efficiency. What's a Konoha dog doing playing in the dirt out here? Naruto ignored the question. I told you to leave, he said, his voice still level, still calm. This is your last chance. Take your men and go. Don't come back. A Konoha dog all alone, Kageyama mused. a cruel smile twisting his lips as he processed the new information. A deserter then? A runaway? No backup. No village to call for help. You've made a big mistake, kid. You should have kept your head down. He cracked his metal-clad knuckles together. You think you're fast? Let's see you dodge this. He didn't charge. He slammed his right gauntlet into the ground. A wave of chakra, crude and unfocused but undeniably powerful, surged from the point of impact. The earth rippled, a low-level Doton technique designed to unbalance an opponent. Naruto, however, felt the surge of chakra through the soles of his feet a split second before the ground even began to shake. His connection to the earth was no longer just a training exercise, it was a part of him. He bent his knees, absorbing the shockwave as if he were a tree bending in a high wind. While his men scrambled for footing, Kageyama used the moment of distraction to launch his attack. He was on Naruto in a flash, his movements far faster than his brutish thugs. His gauntlet fist swung in a vicious uppercut, trailing a faint shimmer of chakra. It wasn't just a punch, it was a battering ram. Naruto met the attack not with force, but with misdirection. He used the body replacement technique, a skill so ingrained it was pure instinct. In his place, a hastily shaped log appeared, the result of a one-handed seal he'd formed in a blur. Crack! Kageyama's gauntlet shattered the log into a shower of splinters. For a moment, he grinned in triumph, before realizing his fist was embedded in wood, not flesh. Naruto reappeared 10 feet to the left, near a shallow irrigation ditch that fed the nearby fields. He had used his knowledge of the land to his advantage, positioning his replacement in a way that would draw Kageyama onto unstable ground. Tricks, Kageyama spat, yanking his fist free. You'll have to do better than that, brat. He charged again, but this time Naruto didn't retreat. He stood his ground at the edge of the ditch. As Kageyama threw a straight punch, Naruto dropped, sweeping his leg out, not at Kageyama's feet, but at the loose, damp soil of the ditch's edge. The ground gave way. Kageyama, his balance already compromised, let out a startled yell as his forward momentum sent him tumbling headfirst into the muddy water of the irrigation ditch. The remaining bandits stared, dumbfounded. Their fearsome leader was currently sputtering and flailing in a foot of muddy water like a drowning cat. Laughter, clear and bright, suddenly erupted from the village. It started with one of the children watching from a window, and it spread like wildfire. The villagers, moments ago paralyzed by fear, were now laughing at the sight of their would-be oppressor covered in mud and weeds. Humiliation was a more potent fuel than greed. Kageyama surged to his feet, his face a mask of incandescent fury. Mud dripped from his scarred head, his eyes burning with murderous intent. You're dead, he screamed, his voice raw with rage. I'm going to tear you limb from limb and burn this entire village to the ground. He lunged out of the ditch, ignoring his men, ignoring any pretense of strategy. There was only rage. He was faster now, fueled by adrenaline and wounded pride. He closed the distance, his gauntlets a blur of motion, throwing a wild flurry of punches. Naruto was forced onto the defensive, backpedaling, deflecting, and dodging. He was rusty. 2 years without a proper spar had taken its toll. His timing was slightly off, his movements not quite as crisp as they once were. One of Kageyama's wild swings grazed his ribs, sending a shock of pain through his side. The missing nin was stronger than he looked, and far more durable. Naruto knew he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed to end it, and end it decisively. He saw his opening. Kageyama, in his rage, was overextending, leaving himself vulnerable. As another punch flew at his head, Naruto ducked under it, pivoted, and with a speed that shocked even himself, formed the seal of the tiger. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In a series of smokeless puffs, a more refined, chakra-efficient version he'd unconsciously perfected over the years, a dozen Narutos appeared, surrounding the bewildered bandits. They weren't armed with kunai. They were armed with shovels, hoes, and thick wooden staves grabbed from a nearby tool shed. The farmers' brigade. The bandits, already unnerved, panicked. They were suddenly outnumbered, facing a dozen identical copies of the boy who had effortlessly dismantled their leader's pride. Don't just stand there, you idiots! Kill them! Kageyama roared, but his focus was still on the original. He saw through the clone's ruse, his trained eyes spotting the subtle, telltale density of chakra around the real Naruto. He ignored the clones engaging his men and charged, his gauntlet raised for a final, decisive blow. It was then that he heard a terrified scream. Not from his men, but from the village. One of the bandits, smarter or perhaps more cowardly than the rest, had ignored the clones and made a break for the nearest house. He kicked down the door and dragged out the first person he could grab, Hana. He held a rusty dagger to the old woman's throat, his eyes wide with terror. "Call them off!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "Call off your demons or the old woman dies." Time stopped. The sounds of the fight, the shouts of the men, the laughter of the villagers, it all faded into a deafening silence. All Naruto could see was Hana, her face pale with terror, her small, frail body held hostage. Hana, who had given him a home. Hana, who had treated him with a kindness he had never known. Hana, who called him her clever little rain cloud. A cold, black wave of rage rose up from the deepest part of his soul. It was a fury so absolute, so pure, that it felt like ice, not fire. The air around him dropped several degrees. The sky, which had been a warm gold, seemed to darken. Yes, Kurama's voice was a triumphant roar, a god of destruction finally given leave to act. Now you understand. Their lives are meaningless. Only hers matters. Let me out. Let me erase them. This time, Naruto didn't argue. He didn't resist. He didn't want to kill them. He wanted to obliterate them. He wanted to make them suffer for daring to lay a hand on his family. He opened the floodgates. A torrent of violent, crimson chakra erupted from him, swirling around his body like a shroud. The ground beneath his feet cracked, the grass sizzling as if touched by acid. His whisker marks deepened, becoming jagged and feral. His canines elongated into fangs. His fingernails thickened into claws, and his eyes, his gentle blue eyes vanished, replaced by the slitted, blood-red gaze of the nine-tailed fox. A raw, palpable aura of malevolence washed over the entire area. It was an ancient, primal killing intent, the likes of which none of the bandits had ever felt before. It wasn't the aura of a skilled assassin, it was the aura of a natural disaster, of a plague, of a vengeful god. The clones, unable to sustain their form against the sheer pressure of the chakra, dissolved into puffs of smoke. The bandit holding Hana whimpered, his hand trembling so badly the dagger clattered against the old woman's collarbone. Kageyama, who had been charging forward, froze in his tracks, his face draining of all color. The bravado, the anger, the pride, it all evaporated, replaced by a pure, instinctual terror that turned his blood to ice water. This was not a runaway genin. This was a demon. He had picked a fight with a force of nature. Naruto, or the thing that was now wearing his face, didn't speak. It didn't need to. It took a single step forward, and the ground groaned in protest. "Let her go," he snarled, and the voice that came out was a layered, demonic growl, a harmony of a boy's rage and a demon's hatred. The bandit holding Hana didn't need to be told twice. He shoved her forward, causing her to stumble and fall, and then he turned and ran. He didn't care about the money, his leader or his pride. He just ran, screaming. The other bandits followed suit, dropping their weapons and scrambling over each other to escape the terrifying red monster that had appeared in their midst. Kageyama was the last to break. For a split second, his pride warred with his terror. Then he saw the red chakra beginning to coalesce around the boy, taking on the faint, ethereal shape of a fox's head with grinning, spectral jaws, and his nerve shattered completely. He turned and fled, his powerful legs pumping as he ran for his life, not even looking back. The monster in Naruto's skin watched them go, a low, guttural growl rumbling in its chest. The killing intent remained, thick and suffocating. It wanted to pursue. It wanted to hunt. Then, a small, frail hand touched its arm. "Naruto," Hana whispered, having pushed herself to her feet. Her voice was trembling, but her touch was firm. "It's all right. I'm safe. They're gone." The red eyes swiveled down to look at her. For a moment, the demon stared at the old woman, its mind a maelstrom of pure, undiluted rage. But her touch, her voice, it was an anchor in the storm. It was a reminder of what he had been fighting for. Slowly, painfully, the crimson chakra receded. It flowed back inward, sucked back behind the seal in his gut as if by a powerful vacuum. The fangs shrank, the claws softened, and the whisker marks returned to normal. The oppressive killing intent vanished, leaving behind a sudden, ringing silence. Naruto's eyes flickered, the demonic red fading back to a deep, exhausted blue. He swayed on his feet, the backlash from the sudden release of power hitting him like a physical blow. He looked around. The bandits were gone. The villagers were staring out from their homes, their faces a mixture of relief, awe, and a new, terrible fear. It was the same look, the same expression he used to get in Konoha after he'd lost his temper, the same look that branded him as other, as dangerous. His heart, which had been pounding with righteous fury, now sank into a cold, heavy pit in his stomach. He had saved them. He had protected his home, but in doing so, he had shown them the monster he kept locked away. He had traded one fear for another. His gaze fell upon Kaido, who was standing on the porch of their home, his face pale, the wood-chopping axe limp in his hand. The old farmer's eyes were wide, not with gratitude, but with a profound, soul-shaking shock. He was staring at Naruto as if seeing him for the first time. The joy of his victory turned to ash in Naruto's mouth. He had driven off the weeds, but in the process, he had revealed the poison root of his own existence. It was into this fragile, ringing silence that a new sound intruded. A slow, deliberate clapping. It came from the edge of the forest that bordered the fields. Clap. 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 Every head turned towards the sound. A figure was leaning against the trunk of a large oak tree, half hidden in the long shadows of the setting sun. He was a tall man, and possibly so, with a wild mane of white hair tied back in a long ponytail. He wore a strange, green outfit over mesh armor and traditional Japanese geta sandals. On his back was a massive scroll. But it was the painted red lines running down from his eyes that were the most distinct feature. Well, well, the man's voice boomed across the field, a rich baritone laced with amusement, and something else, something serious. A little overkill for a pack of common thugs, don't you think? Hiding your skills, are we, brat? Naruto's blood ran cold. He knew that face. He knew that voice from the stories and bingo book pictures that circulated among the genin. He was a legend. A Sannin. The Toad Sage. Jiraiya straightened up from the tree and began to walk towards the village, his expression unreadable. And Naruto knew, with a certainty that was as cold and sharp as a saban needle to the heart, that his 2 years of peace were officially over. The past had not just been weeded, it had come back to claim the entire field. The arrival of a Sannin in a remote farming hamlet is an event akin to a thunderstorm materializing in a clear blue sky. It is a fundamental disruption of the natural order, a clash of worlds so profound that it leaves an indelible mark on everything it touches. Jiraiya of the Sannin, the legendary Toad Sage, possessed an aura that was a complex cocktail of immense power, worldly weariness, and a faint, lingering scent of sake and cheap perfume. It was an aura that did not belong amongst rows of daikon radishes and quiet, hard-working folk. He strolled into the hamlet not like a warrior, but like a landowner inspecting his property. His gaze swept over the stunned villagers, the discarded bandit weapons, the terrified but unharmed Hana, and finally settled, with a sharp, analytical intensity, on Naruto. The boy was still trembling, not from fear, but from the violent backlash of Kurama's chakra receding. He looked pale, exhausted, and profoundly lost. The villagers, who had been staring at Naruto with a mixture of awe and terror, now shifted their apprehensive gazes to the newcomer. This man was obviously a shinobi, and a powerful one at that. His presence was 100 times more intimidating than Kageyama's entire gang. Kaido, his face a grim mask of resolve, stepped forward, placing himself protectively between Jiraiya and his wife. "Who are you?" Kaido demanded, his voice tight. "What do you want here?" Jiraiya's gaze flickered to the old farmer, taking in the defiant posture and the callous hands. He offered a disarming, almost goofy grin. "Just a wandering writer, old-timer, doing research for my next book. Happened to be in the neighborhood when the show started. Quite a performance." His eyes slid back to Naruto. "Especially from your boy here." The casual way he said your boy did not go unnoticed. It was a subtle test, a fishing expedition. Naruto, however, was in no state for social subtleties. "You're Jiraiya," Naruto said, his voice hoarse. "One of the legendary Sannin." "Guilty as charged," Jiraiya confirmed with a theatrical bow. "And you are Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. And a real pain in the backside to track down, I might add." The name, Jinchuriki, fell into the stunned silence with the weight of a meteor. It was a word most of the villagers had never heard, but its tone, the way Jiraiya said it, was freighted with a significance that was both terrifying and absolute. It explained the red chakra, the demonic eyes, the monstrous power. It was a label, a brand, and it instantly shattered the simple identity Naruto had spent 2 years carefully constructing. He was no longer Naruto the farmer. He was Naruto the Jinchuriki. Kaido's grip on his axe tightened, while Hana let out a soft, frightened gasp. They didn't understand the word, but they understood the implications. The boy they had taken in, the child they had come to love as their own, was carrying a secret, a burden of immense and terrifying proportions. "We need to talk," Jiraiya said to Naruto, his playful demeanor evaporating, replaced by a no-nonsense gravity. "Alone." Naruto looked from Jiraiya's demanding face to the fearful expressions of the villagers. He saw the confusion and hurt in Hana's eyes, the stony, unreadable mask on Kaido's. This was his fault. His past had finally caught up, and it was poisoning the only home he had ever known. He gave a short, jerky nod and led the Sannin towards the farmhouse, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on his back. The small, rustic kitchen of the farmhouse felt claustrophobic with Jiraiya's presence. He filled the space, his sheer size and the immensity of his chakra making the familiar room feel alien. Hana had retreated to the bedroom, and Kaido stood stiffly in the doorway, a silent, disapproving sentinel. Jiraiya ignored him, pulling out a chair at the small wooden table and sitting down with a weary sigh. He motioned for Naruto to do the same. Naruto remained standing. "Let's get a few things straight," Jiraiya began, his voice low and serious. "First, I'm not here to drag you back to Konoha." "Not exactly. Then why are you here?" Naruto asked, his voice laced with a bitter resentment. "To blow up my life? You did a pretty good job of that in 5 minutes. I'm here because the third Hokage is an old fool with a soft spot for a certain blonde-haired brat," Jiraiya retorted, his gaze sharp. "He honored your ridiculous request to quit being a ninja, but he didn't hang you out to dry. He sent me to keep an eye on you. From a distance, to make sure you didn't get yourself killed or, more importantly, captured." Jiraiya leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his expression becoming grim. "And that brings me to the second point. That little show you put on out there? The red chakra, the fangs? You just painted a target on this entire village a mile wide. There are people in this world who hunt Jinchuriki, Naruto. An organization of S-rank missing nin called the Akatsuki." He let the name hang in the air. "They've been on the move. They're collecting the tailed beasts, one by one. I don't know their ultimate goal, but I know it's nothing good. They've already captured some. I got word a few months back that they made a move on the Kazakage of Sanagekure, the one-tails Jinchuriki." Naruto's blood ran cold. The merchant's rumors. They were true. "Gaara," he whispered. "So you know him," Jiraiya noted. "The Akatsuki are methodical, they are patient, and they are absurdly powerful. The two who went after Gaara were Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hashigaki. You've heard of them?" Naruto nodded numbly. Itachi, the prodigy who had massacred his entire clan, leaving only his younger brother, Sasuke, alive. And Kisame, a monster from the hidden mist, one of the 7 swordsmen. That was the caliber of enemy hunting people like him. You've been lucky, living out here in the middle of nowhere, Jiraiya continued, his voice relentless. You've been off the grid. But a display like the one you just made, that kind of chakra surge doesn't go unnoticed. It sends out ripples. Sooner or later, someone who knows what to look for is going to come investigating. And when the Akatsuki find you here, they won't just take you. They'll slaughter every man, woman, and child in this village as an afterthought, just to tie up loose ends. Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the fragile peace Naruto had built. He had thought he was protecting his home by fighting off the bandits. Instead, he had endangered it on a scale he could never have imagined. His power wasn't a tool for protection, it was a beacon for monsters. You see the problem, Jiraiya said, correctly interpreting Naruto's horrified silence. You can't stay here. Not anymore. You need to come back to Konoha. It's the only place you'll be safe. The village has the resources, the manpower, to protect you. We can train you, help you control the fox's power so you don't have to rely on these dangerous, uncontrolled outbursts. He sat back, his case made. It was a logical, rational argument. It was the only sensible path, and Naruto refused to take it. No, he said, the word quiet but as solid and unyielding as granite. Jiraiya blinked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. No? Did you not hear what I just said? We're talking about S-rank criminals, kid. This isn't a game. Your life is on the line. I heard you, Naruto said, his gaze lifting from the floor to meet the Sanin's. There was no fear in his eyes, only a deep, sorrowful resolve. You're telling me to run. To abandon these people. To go hide behind Konoha's walls and let the village protect me. He shook his head slowly. I left Konoha because I didn't want to be a weapon they protected. I came here and I found a home. A real one. His voice grew stronger, filled with a conviction that was absolute. You're telling me that because of the monster inside me, my home is in danger. You're telling me that the only way to protect it is to leave it. But that's not protection. That's abandonment. That's cowardice. It's the same thing as letting those bandits take whatever they wanted. I won't do it. He took a deep breath, his decision solidifying in his heart. My home is here. The people I need to protect are here. I am not leaving. A long, heavy silence filled the small kitchen. Kaito, who had been standing rigidly in the doorway, shifted his weight, his knuckles white where he gripped the doorframe. He was listening to every word, his expression unreadable. Jiraiya stared at Naruto, truly seeing him for the first time. He had expected a brat, a naive idealist, or a terrified child. He had not expected this. He had not expected a young man with a spine of forged steel and a devotion to this patch of dirt that rivaled the will of fire he'd seen in the greatest shinobi. He saw the same stubborn, unshakable loyalty he had seen in his own student, the fourth Hokage. It was both infuriating and deeply admirable. The Sannin let out a long, frustrated sigh, running a hand through his wild white hair. You stubborn, bull-headed little. You're just like him, he muttered, more to himself than to Naruto. He looked at the boy's defiant face, at the simple, rustic home around them, at the silent, stoic old farmer in the doorway. He realized that dragging Naruto back to Konoha against his will would be impossible. It would break his spirit, and a Jinchuriki with a broken spirit was a time bomb. He needed a new approach. All right, Jiraiya said, his tone shifting. You win. You want to stay? You stay. But we're not going to just sit here and wait for the Akatsuki to show up for dinner. If you're going to make a stand here, then you're going to be strong enough to make it count. We're going to do things your way, but we're also going to do them my way. He leaned forward again, his eyes locking with Naruto's. I'll accept your decision on one condition. I stay. Right here, in this backwater village. And I train you. Not to be a Konoha shinobi. Not to go on missions or fight in wars. I will train you for one purpose and one purpose only, to be strong enough to defend yourself, and this village, from an S-rank threat. You want to be this place's guardian? Fine. Then you'd better be ready to become a guardian with fangs of your own. It was a compromise Naruto hadn't anticipated. To be trained by a Sannin, but on his own terms? To learn to control his power not for a village that had scorned him, but for the home that had accepted him? It was a lifeline. I accept, Naruto said without hesitation. Good, Jiraiya grunted, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. He stood up, stretching his long limbs and groaning dramatically. In that case, our first training session begins right now. He walked to the front door, Naruto following him, and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was setting, bathing the fields in a deep orange glow. The villagers were still clustered in small, worried groups, their fear a palpable thing in the evening air. First lesson, Jiraiya announced, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. He pointed a long finger towards the main path into the village. You have one point of entry and egress. No walls, no watchtowers, no natural barriers. Any enemy can walk right up to your front door, just like those bandits did. Your fields are wide open, offering no cover for a retreat and 1,000 places for an ambush. He pointed to the well. Your only source of fresh water is completely exposed and easily poisoned. He gestured to the surrounding forest. The tree line is too close. It offers perfect cover for an approaching enemy force to gather undetected. From a tactical standpoint, this village isn't just vulnerable, it's an invitation to be slaughtered. He turned to face Naruto, his expression deadly serious. You want to protect this place? Your first lesson isn't in ninjutsu. It's in realizing just how fragile your peace actually is. Your farm isn't a fortress, kid. Right now, it's a dinner plate, and the whole world is hungry. Naruto looked around, seeing his home through Jiraiya's eyes for the first time. He saw the vulnerabilities, the glaring weaknesses he'd been blind to. He had been so focused on nurturing the life within the village that he had never considered how to protect it from the death that lay outside. The scale of the task ahead, of the responsibility he had just claimed, settled on his shoulders with an immense, crushing weight. As the last rays of sunlight faded, casting long, somber shadows across the land, Jiraiya clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry, brat. I'm a hell of a teacher. We'll make a proper guardian out of you yet. The Sanin's attempt at encouragement was cut short by a quiet, firm voice. He will need his strength. Both Naruto and Jiraiya turned. Kaido was standing in the doorway, his face still grim, but the fear in his eyes had been replaced by a deep, weary resolve. In one hand, he held a steaming bowl of rice and vegetables. A man who is to be a guardian must first eat, the old farmer said, his voice a low rumble. He walked past Jiraiya and handed the bowl to Naruto. His calloused, earth-stained fingers brushed against Naruto's, and for the first time since the fight, his eyes met the boy's. The shock was gone. In its place was a complex mixture of emotions, concern, acceptance, and a profound, unspoken sorrow. He looked at Naruto not as a monster, but as a boy who was carrying a burden too heavy for any child. There is much work to be done, Kaido said, his gaze sweeping over his vulnerable home. If we are to have walls, we will need to cut wood. If we are to have a watchtower, we will need to build it. The work of a guardian is not his alone. It was a declaration. It was acceptance. It was a promise. He was not casting Naruto out. He was standing with him. In that moment, Naruto understood. He wasn't just fighting for them anymore. They were ready to fight alongside him, in the only way they knew how. Tears welled in Naruto's eyes, blurring the image of the old man's stoic face. He had been so sure he had ruined everything, that he had become a monster in their eyes. But he had been wrong. This was family, and family did not run when things got hard. As Naruto took the bowl, his hunger suddenly ravenous, Jiraiya watched the exchange with a thoughtful expression. He had come here expecting to find a weapon that needed to be contained. Instead, he had found a boy who was forging himself into a shield, supported by the very people he sought to protect. It was a dynamic he had never encountered before. Well, the Sannin said, breaking the poignant silence. Looks like I'll need a place to stay. You got a spare room that doesn't smell too much like fertilizer? Kaido shot him a withering glare. The barn is dry. You can sleep with the chickens. Jiraiya's jaw dropped in mock offense, and for the first time that evening, a small, watery chuckle escaped Naruto's lips. The tension that had held the village in its grip began to ease, replaced by the first tentative stirrings of a new, more defiant hope. Later that night, long after the village had settled into a restless sleep, Naruto sat on the porch steps, staring up at the stardusted sky. Jiraiya found him there, a small flask of sake in his hand. He sat down beside the boy, the wooden step groaning in protest. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the symphony of the night crickets. You're a good kid, Naruto, Jiraiya said finally, his voice surprisingly gentle. You've got a good heart. Too good for the world we live in, maybe. I just want to protect them, Naruto said quietly. Is that so wrong? No, Jiraiya replied, taking a swig from his flask. It's never wrong. But good intentions don't stop a kunai. There's something else you need to know, something the third Hokage should have told you a long time ago. It's about why you have the nine tails inside you. It's about why you have that last name, and that face. Naruto turned to look at him, his full attention captured. 16 years ago, the Nine Tails attacked Konoha, Jiraiya began, his voice taking on the somber tone of a historian recounting a tragedy. It appeared out of nowhere, a walking apocalypse. The shinobi of the village fought and died to hold it back, but nothing could stop it. Nothing, until our leader at the time, the fourth Hokage, stepped onto the battlefield. He paused, letting the weight of the title sink in. The fourth couldn't kill the Nine Tails. A being of pure chakra can't be killed. It can only be contained. So he did the only thing he could. He performed a powerful sealing jutsu, a forbidden art that summons the very god of death. But a jutsu of that magnitude requires the ultimate price, the user's own soul. He gave his life to seal the fox away and save the village. Jiraiya turned, his dark eyes boring into Naruto's. To perform the seal, he needed a vessel. A newborn child, whose chakra coils were pure and undeveloped, able to adapt to the immense power of the beast. He chose a child who had just been born that very night. An orphan of the attack. He chose you, Naruto. Naruto felt the air leave his lungs. He had always known, on some level, that his connection to the fox was tied to the attack on Konoha. But to hear it laid out so starkly, so coldly. But that's not the whole story, Jiraiya continued, his voice dropping even lower. The fourth Hokage didn't just pick a random orphan, Naruto. He wouldn't have asked another family to bear a burden he wasn't willing to bear himself. The sealing required a blood connection to ensure its strength. He took a deep, final swig from his flask before delivering the final, world-altering revelation. The fourth Hokage, the hero who saved Konoha, his name was Minato Namikaze. And he was your father. The world tilted on its axis. The stars seemed to spin. The quiet chirping of the crickets became a deafening roar. My father? The legendary Yellow Flash? The hero whose face was carved on the Hokage monument, the man whose legacy he had unknowingly spent his entire life being measured against, and falling short of. The man who had cursed him with this life, this burden, this monstrous power? The man who had also, in the same act, saved his life and the lives of everyone in the village he had once called home? It was too much. The hero and the monster, the savior and the tormentor, were one and the same. They were his blood. The weight of it all, the Akatsuki, the decision to stay, the revelation of his lineage, crashed down on him at once. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stared into the darkness, a silent, stunned boy sitting on the porch of a small farmhouse, his entire understanding of who he was shattered and remade in the space of a single breath. The harvest of his past had finally been reaped, and its seeds were more strange and terrible than he could have ever imagined.